And if all we do is just hold back the forces of darkness, that is a sacred duty. We are doing exactly what people before us did.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today, Jess and I were going to take a vacation, like all of the Republicans in the House decided to do, but instead, here we are fighting alongside the Democrats to save our health care while also hiding our hands in our faces like a general summoned to Quantico.
And we've got a great conversation for you, filled with perspective and hope, with the amazing author of today's edition newsletter, also my friend, Robert Hubbell. I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Hold on, stay strong, it won't be long, yeah, yeah, we will build a better world.
So excited that Robert Hubbell came and talked to you, Steve. He is such a gem. I'm sure lots of people, if not everybody, listening to this podcast already reads him.
Yeah, I'm guessing the Venn diagram of our listeners and people who know about Robert Hubbell is pretty large, but the crossover, I should say. But yeah, I had actually never had a conversation with him before. It was the first time I got to connect with him, which is crazy because he really lives right down the road, and we've all been doing this work together since Trump v1. But what a great guy, so smart, so insightful. Of course, he's on Substack now, which is where Chopwood Carry Water is. We're on Substack too, and we would all love your support. Man, we need it more than ever right now with all the attacks on the press and on free speech and everything this administration's doing. So, but yeah, he's so aligned. I mean, he's like Practivist pod, not even adjacent. He's right here in the pod with us.
Yeah. And he walks the walk too. Robert and I mean, we're friends. We go back several years at this point. And Robert and I and his wife, Jill, and a few other friends of theirs were in North Carolina canvassing together for the presidential elections. A trip that had a very horrible ending, but was really pleasant until the horrible ending. So I unfortunately was with Robert at the moment that we realized that Kamala Harris was going to lose, and he was the first person to call me in the morning to confirm it. And so he had me crying on the phone. We've been through a lot, let's just say, good and bad. But he's great. Not to bring back unpleasant memories for everybody, but I don't
want to. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for you or for our listeners because I know you haven't heard the interview yet either. But he does share a Jess Craven canvassing story.
Does he?
gives you a lot of props. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, anyway, but there's a lot to talk about. Is there ever going to be a week where we don't start by saying, what an insane week? But this one really might be even more insane than usual.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, it should be. By any measure, it should be more insane than usual. In fact, the press conference or the convening of 800 plus top military officials so that Pete Hegseth could give this sort of weird TED talk on, facial hair and warrior ethos and how many push-ups he can do. And Trump could, in really one of his most rambly and incoherent speeches in a while, which is saying a lot, rambled on for over an hour, for about 80 minutes. This would be an enormous scandal by any measure in any other administration. It would, even just the idea of bringing all these, top military officials and the president and the Secretary of Defense. Sorry, Congress hasn't approved that yet. I'm not going to call him the Secretary of War. All in one place is just an insane, risky move for our national security. But I actually got some hope from it that was relayed to me from your friend Robert Hubbell too about the whole thing. But I'm interested to hear what your reaction was to that absolutely insane and really deeply damaging event.
Yeah, well, it was insane and deeply damaging. I think the first thing that needs to be said is I never thought that I would see a male ego that was more fragile and insecure than Donald Trump's. But I think maybe Pete Hegseth is maybe the most insecure man I have ever seen in my life. That was such a display of like, I feel terrible about myself.
I've had my moments, but maybe you haven't seen them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't know. Have you ever gotten up on a stage and talked about beardos? Like, I didn't watch it. And you guys know this about me. Like, I will not watch fascist rallies. This was and wasn't a fascist rally. The people on stage were doing fascist rally, but fortunately, and I think you're going to talk about this in a second, our generals did not do that. They did what they are required to do by military code, which when they are in uniform they are not to be at political rallies. It's not allowed. And so they acted like generals who were not at a political rally. They sat in total silence, as they should. I would give anything to have been inside the head of pretty much any single one of them, or to hear their sort of pillow talk with their, spouses or best friends afterwards. Because I'm sure it was just one variation after another on what a fucking shit show that was. How embarrassing. How incredibly demoralizing for the military. What an international embarrassment. I'm mortified. But, we won't get to hear those things until maybe later we will. But yeah, anyway, go on. What were you going to say about this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all of that. And, to your point, it's important to recognize that they are, required. It's part of their ethos, I'll say, to be nonpartisan and to not respond to any kind of partisan rhetoric. So that's what they're trained to do. So, it was a silent room. God, I think Hegseth actually started just playing to the cameras, right? He was kind of waiting for a response, didn't get it. So he played to the cameras, but Trump didn't know what to do with himself, and he was trying to joke with them and do all that. But importantly, like looking at the pictures of this event, it was really telling. And, I don't want to read too much into one photo because you can catch anyone in an expression and, put whatever you want onto that. But if you look at all of the photos of their reactions, they were not just like somber, but they were actively chagrined. They like you said, there was some pictures with their hands in their faces. They were kind of whispering to each other, not in a if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me whispering in a gleeful way, like, "Oh yeah, that's really great that he's doing that," or whatever. You're like anything like that, yeah. But it was just like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, this is, a disaster. And there have been some reports of people saying there was so many things that I could have been doing that would have been a better use of my time than being in that room.
100%. Like keeping us safe. Sorry, I just had to say that. Yes.
Well, keeping us safe.
Like
but
keeping
the big point,
us safe. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's the big point. Let's pull all of them up from all over the world, and the expense of it too, for just like this, photo op trying to show whatever they're trying to show. Like you said, they bolster their fragile egos. But what Robert Hubbell pointed out, and what I've been reflecting on a lot since that conversation, and so I'm kind of spoiling it, but a lot of people have been coming to both of us, to all of us, saying, what if Trump declares martial law and there's no elections? What if he gets the military on his side? Then how are we supposed to, combat that? What we saw from this room was a military that was very much not on his side. Not to say there aren't some people in there that support what he's doing. Of course there are. But, what would have been an absolute, unmitigated, frightening disaster is if he had gone in that room and they had applauded him, and they had cheered for him, and they had given him what they wanted and sucked up to dear leader, and that would have meant a very, very scary and dark period. But they didn't do that. They respect the Constitution. They respect, what their actual mandate is when he says we're going to, use cities as training grounds for the military and all that, and this enemy within. Like, they're not on board with that. It was clear. It was very clear from that they're not. So that really gives me a lot of hope. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that, I wasn't as worried about this event as lots of people. I tend to sort of, I think people overestimate Trump's popularity and his competence quite a bit. That's not to say that he's not incredibly dangerous, but people were like, oh, right, he's going to, they're going to get there and he's going to declare martial law. Well, that would require all of their cooperation. And our military, whatever you think about it, like these are the people who were there have been in military leadership for decades. They've lived through lots of administrations. They are ingrained in a culture that is deeply patriotic and not loyal to a single leader. Like, of course, there are people within who are less, ideal than others, but the overall culture is still deeply professional, deeply patriotic, and deeply, sort of steeped in codes that are about protecting the Constitution and the country. I don't look at the military with some doe-eyed like, oh, they're perfect. They're definitely not. But I didn't expect these guys to fawn all over Trump or show that they were willing to, violate the Constitution for him, and they didn't. And I also, I think that what Trump said about if you don't like it, if you're not, you should get up and walk out if you don't like what I'm saying. Yeah, it's fucked up. But believe me, most of these guys are going to outlast Trump. They're going to outlast this administration. They will be here long after MAGAs are gone. And they know that, he can fire a few of them if he doesn't like them, but ultimately, like, he needs a military, and these are the military brass. So, yeah, it was very disturbing. I do encourage people, every time we have an event like this, there is this, like, worst case scenario, and then people start listening to people online who are like, I've heard that what's going to happen is, and it's another great example of, like, believe me, this was horrible. But it was horrible because it was a waste of money and an embarrassment, and it shows how unserious Hegseth and Trump are. But, like, these conspiracy theories about what's going to happen because our military is going to fold, I just encourage people to give our military a little bit more credit. I think they have now proven to us that they deserve that. And he needs their buy-in to become a total authoritarian, and it is extremely clear that, at least at this moment, he does not have it, and nothing that they just did is going to win him any new loyalty. All you could see on that stage was a deranged, mentally incompetent, self-absorbed, narcissistic idiot. And that's not going to win military over. They're not going, this is a great leader, I must follow him. They're like, oh God.
No, and these are really educated, like, career, like, these are
smart people.
And you talk about, like, seeing people come and go, like, they've seen so many people come and go, and they've seen thousands of Pete Hegseths in their ranks, that kind of toxic, and they've ousted thousands of Pete Hegseths from their ranks because they understand, how destructive that is to our military, to our security, and all of it. So they saw it for what it was. But, your point's really good. Also, just the larger point about, I don't want to say like conspiracy theories, but catastrophizing everything. Like, we're in a catastrophe. Like, this is serious stuff that's happening, and it's unprecedented, and we're seeing move after move that hasn't happened in our country before. But, I really encourage people, in the spirit of the Practivists and practical activism and the practice of activism, to focus on what we can do. I think, like, I fall back and, I'm in recovery. I've been sober for a long time. So I fall back on the serenity prayer a lot, which is difficult in these times. But that's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, this is a very hard thing to do, to accept things I cannot change, when the things that I'm being called upon to accept are completely untenable and don't reflect my values. So I'm not saying we accept that racism is going to be here. And there's stuff we can do about that. There's active work that we can do day in and day out. But, if we do that work and focus on what our role is, and also, our family, our community, and all of that, I just encourage people to let go of the mental space that it takes to worry about things like martial law being called and the military coming into city, where we really don't have, as an individual, I certainly don't, any ability to affect that if that was going to happen. Does that make any sense to you, what I'm saying? It's I don't mean let go of your fears, process them and all that. And these are real things to be concerned about, but focus on what we can do right now. Yep. And try to find that. I mean, that's about balance in life, that acceptance and that serenity, but this is not going anywhere. This is our life's work. We may win some battles, then we're going to be fighting some more, and we're going to have some more losses. And, we've got to get to a place where we are grounded in this work.
Right. Well, what I tell people, it's actually quite simple. It's just deal with what's actually happening, not what may happen. That's really straightforward. Just because generally
I'm going to edit out everything else, everything I just said, and just go with that.
It's shorter. I will say that. It is just deal with what's happening. And when we think we know what's going to happen, we are almost always wrong. And particularly when our fear is inflamed, we are less and less good at predicting the future. So I cannot describe the amount of mental energy people I know have expended worrying about things that did not happen. And there's plenty to worry about that is happening. So I just recommend keeping your worry for things. I can lose sleep every night about people who are in detention centers right now effectively being tortured. That's but whether Trump is going to declare martial law next year during the midterms, Jesus, that is so far from something I can control now. Yep. Let it go. And do actions now that make that less likely. What can I do now to make that less likely? And then we go down the little continuum of, I can strengthen our democracy. How can I strengthen our democracy? I can call my representatives and work on winning an election. Which election can I work on? Well, we can talk about that, Steve.
Yeah. I'll also say, I know we need to talk about that, but just to piggyback on what you just said, practically, we know that if we go to that doom and gloom space with everybody, it actually has a cooling effect on them doing all the things that we need them to do.
Absolutely. Right.
And so I was in a great meeting last week. I was speaking about Blue Wave and Prop 50 and all that. And I had somebody who said, what if there's martial law and we don't have elections? And, I respect that that's a fear that folks have. But my, respectful answer was, what fucking difference does it make? We need to build for the midterms right now. We need to do everything that we can do right now. If that happens, then I don't know. We deal with it at the time. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that's very unlikely that that's going to happen. But if it does, we deal with it at a time. But we can't let that some nebulous, there may not be elections, stop us from doing everything we can to win these next elections, because we must win
100%.
them. So.
Well, and especially because that is obeying in advance. That's what Trump wants us to think. Trump loves that everybody thinks he is going to declare martial law, because by thinking that, we've effectively given him permission to do that. Oh, well, he can, so I guess he will. No, he really can't, and he won't, because we're not going to let him. I really encourage people to channel their inner defiance. He wants us to go, he beat us already. No, he didn't. There's a great Jamel Bowie video, which I'm going to put on my Instagram. I love it so much because he's like, Trump wants you to think that the authoritarian takeover has happened. It hasn't. He's trying, but the military this week was a great reminder that he has not fully succeeded. When he has fully succeeded, you will know it, because this podcast will not exist anymore. I will not be on social media saying whatever shit I want about Trump. My newsletter will go away. We can still, as Jamel Bowie said so eloquently, we can still express our dissent. We can still fight back. Some institutions have folded. And as he said, Trump loves to highlight the ones that fold, because, again, it makes him look super powerful. He never talks about the institutions that are not folding, and there are many of them. So Our job is to keep remembering all the institutions, people, groups, lawmakers who are not folding, to help them to be people who don't fold ourselves, and to not give him powers he doesn't have. He wants you to do that. Don't do it. He's still, I'm sorry, he's a paper tiger. He's a paper tiger with a lot of power who can ruin a lot of lives, but he is not fully what he is pretending to be yet. And if we do our jobs well, he will never be that. Okay.
He is actually, thank you. Great rant. He's weak. And he's
weak.
Faltering, and he can't make a speech without sounding like a complete, asshole. I mean, that obviously, but like he, just him speaking, any other president would be, it would be the sky is falling right now. We need to do something about what's happening. Obviously we've talked in the last few weeks about how even within his diehard MAGA coalition, he is losing people. He's losing people over Epstein. He's losing people over the attacks on the First Amendment and free speech. The
economy,
faltering.
Which keeps getting
let's
worse
talk
and
about
worse.
the economy. That's a good segue right now, because we went on, but I thought it was a good conversation to have about that shit crazy thing. But our government is now shut down thanks to the Republicans. I don't know how it's possible for anyone to think that it's not the Republicans responsible for this when they control Congress, Senate, White House, SCOTUS, even, like they have all the power. And Democrats, they're fighting. Some of the images, talk about some incredible images, watching the images of Congress yesterday with all the Democrats sitting in there and the Republicans just gone, like refusing to engage, not even going to show up, and what are Democrats fighting for? Healthcare. They're fighting to keep people's, right to health care happening and not in these insane cuts. And importantly, also, they're fighting to make sure that Trump can't unilaterally just decide not to spend money that Congress has appropriated. And Robert talks a lot about that too in our conversation. But
he's big on that. And it's important. It's important for people to understand that what Trump has been doing for the last 8 months or however many eternities we've been in this situation is it's borderline illegal. Some would argue illegal, definitely unconstitutional. Just refusing to spend money that Congress has already allocated. And I know Robert will talk about it a lot, so I won't much, but Jeffries and Schumer, of whom I'm not huge fans, as you know, but like right now they're doing more or less the right thing, which is they are attacking from a legislative angle to the best of their ability, something that Republicans are trying to do from a legislative angle, which is basically gut and kill the ACA so that everyone gets thrown onto private health insurance and pays a lot more money so that their buddies and rich cronies can make more money. And they've been wanting to kill the ACA since Trump's first term. They tried, 70 times in Trump's first term. And now they've got another way of doing it, which is, we're going to defund these ACA premium tax credits. No one will be able to afford their health insurance anymore. They'll either spend a shitload of money on these higher premiums, and that's all bling bling for the insurance companies, or some people will fall off, and we don't care about those people because they're poor. And the entire ACA is based on enough people being on it to sort of keep the insurance pools, thriving. Right. And there's something called the death spiral, which I don't it's like, I'm not going to go into the details here, but basically you need to keep enough people on the exchange for the exchange to work properly and be affordable. And it's I made a whole video about this yesterday because Trump, again, yesterday's, the ACA is bad. It's bad. It's bad. It has gotten 48 million fucking Americans health insured who didn't have it before. It has cut our uninsured rate in half. Like, it is so insulting to every single person who has health insurance as a result of the Affordable Care Act to hear Trump say, it's bad, we can make it better. Really? With what idea? You've never had a single idea about how to improve it. You've never proposed anything else.
Years we've been asking him, what's your health care plan? Yeah.
No, and he was trying desperately to kill it with no plan. I mean, what would have happened if John McCain had not done the famous thumbs down? There was nothing set up to replace it, and there's nothing this time either. They legitimately do not give a shit. If you are poor, they don't care. I really have come to believe, talk about conspiracy theories, The idea that Republicans just don't care if you live or die if you're poor, I actually think is true. I actually think they don't care.
Well, their actions,
and this is proof.
Their actions are proof of that. I think Pelosi was the one who coined the phrase, a budget is a statement of your values.
I mean, who votes for these people? I don't understand it. Sorry, I'm done.
But that's a great segue. Who votes for them? So this is the defining issue that will be carrying into the midterms and will help us flip the House. Just as it was, when they were trying to rip away the ACA in 2018, and those votes that Republicans made and their efforts to take away health care really contributed to the blue wave we had in 2018 and taking back the House. This is going to be the issue that does it again. So
100%.
So, our job right now, let's talk about our action items. First of all, as it relates to the shutdown, Republicans are going to try to spin this any way they can to blame Democrats, even though Democrats are not in power and they refuse to meet with them or talk to them, and they didn't even show up to the House for session. They're still going to try to blame Democrats. So, we need to get out there and make sure that we call this what it is. This is Trump's government shutdown. This is the Republicans' government shutdown, and Democrats are fighting for your health care, and Republicans want to make sure that their tax breaks to ultra rich billionaires stay in place. So get that message out there to your circles, because Republicans are certainly going to be pumping it the other direction. And then in terms of elections, Prop 50 is coming up fast. Ballots actually drop here in California next week on October 6th. That's when, ballots will arrive in people's mailboxes and they can start voting. So that's the crazy thing about California. If you're not from here, you think about November 4th being election day. So I've got, GOTV like the week before that and all this time. GOTV happens basically when ballots drop because people can get those ballots in early. So, so don't wait to get involved in Prop 50. We'll have a link to volunteer opportunities to, if you're here in California, just knock on doors. If you're from outside, to make phone calls. We need all the help we can get. I'll say, I think I said this last week, it still holds up. The polling has been good, not like great, but, favorable. It's showing what we need, like, 51, 52% favorability on this overall. Democrats favor it. So, we have it in the right direction. What we don't have is a lot of people who even know about this election. That's the biggest hurdle, is folks don't know there's a special election. So this is a really satisfying way to volunteer. If you're a Democrat, you're calling other Democrats. You're just letting them know about this and making sure that they get that ballot in. And, that's how we're going to win it, is just turnout. So, that's my spiel about Prop 50 once again. Boy, it couldn't be more important. We will have such a huge leg up heading into the midterms if we're able to counteract this crazy partisan gerrymandering that Republicans have done in Texas and are trying to do elsewhere.
Yep. And then there's also, of course, the Virginia gubernatorial, which, by the way, I just want to say, I read yesterday that the early vote turnout is favoring Republicans. So we need people to get out. We cannot lose those Virginia races. We've got great candidates literally up and down the ballot. Abigail Spanberger, the person running for lieutenant governor, I have forgotten their name right now. Sorry. So, but up and down the ballot, just great. Also attorney general. We've got a young guy. I think he's 36. Great guy running for attorney general. All of those state legislative seats. Really, really important. The woman running as the Republican governor candidate is big Trump, big defund public schools, opposes gay marriage, opposes abortion, I think in every single circumstance. She's bad. So there's that. And then in New Jersey, the gubernatorial race right now, the polls are neck and neck, you guys. We should not be polling this close. It's frightening, especially because Jack Ciattarelli, is that how you say his name? The Republican, okay, we're going to say it that way here. I mean, Trump mispronounces everybody's name, so why do I even care? He, first of all,
I'm
released
taking
all
my,
of Mikey.
acetaminophen.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Also, so.
Don't take that stuff. No, I'm only joking. Mikey Sherrill, he released all of her personal information. He basically doxed her using information that the Trump administration leaked to her. And he's caught on video yesterday, I'm about to make a video about this, saying that, yes, raising taxes on New Jersey residents is on the table, but not for millionaires, only for everybody else. Because the millionaires are the ones who are providing us all with jobs, and so we can't tax them. Like literally, he said those words out loud. So you do
more
with
like
that as
they're
you want, New
providing
Jersey.
him with campaign donations. So
Totally. I mean, the trickle down myth. 50 years in the making, we have had this thing debunked through our lived experience.
Yeah,
and yet he's still out there using it. That's great.
Yeah,
anyway,
we've
so
never
you guys,
had such drastic wealth inequality than we do today. It's just staggering, and this whole trickle down. Well, anyway, but I'm glad you brought up both of those. And Virginia, we haven't really talked about it that much. I guess we've been a little bit subsumed by Prop 50, which is also important. But Virginia is such an important bellwether. Like, it's such an important marker going into the midterms, and everyone looks at our volunteer engagement in Virginia and how we perform there as a sort of precursor to what we have going on in the midterms. So, it will cool good candidates from jumping in to run for congressional seats if we have these big blowouts. And it will, if it's close, if Republicans do well, then it's going to encourage them to really go all out for the midterms. So very important. Virginia is always a very, very important race. So please do what you can there as well.
Thank you.
All right, so we've talked about some hopeful stuff, but there's even more. But wait, there's more. Amidst this giant shit show that we're living through, there's a lot of hope. So what's your reason for hope?
Well, and I think Robert Hubbell and Heather Cox Richardson have both talked about this already. But I'm going to talk about it too. We had this Reagan-appointed judge yesterday who issued basically 161-page rebuke to the Trump administration. This was a case about the U.S. government targeting pro-Palestinian student activists for deportation for simply writing news articles criticizing their schools for their position on Israel and Palestine. But the judge who wrote this opinion, I'm not going to quote a lot of it because it's very long, but it's really uplifting and deeply inspiring. I will just say that he said that he had received a postcard from someone who sort of trolled him by postcard, I guess, as he was weighing the merits of this case, saying, "Trump has pardons and tanks. What do you have?" So he attaches a copy of this postcard to the very top of his opinion. And then he writes, "Dear Mr. or Ms. Anonymous," so he's responding to the postcard writer, "alone I have nothing but my sense of duty. Together, we the people of the United States, you and me, have our magnificent Constitution." And then he says, here's how that works out in a specific case. And he goes on to talk about how deeply unconstitutional Trump's and his administration's actions were. But throughout this entire opinion are just these spectacular defenses of the Constitution. And he one last thing, it's a quote actually from Ronald Reagan's inaugural speech, which I hate to quote Reagan, but freedom is a fragile thing, and it's never more than one generation away from extinction. It is not ours by way of inheritance. It must be fought for and defended constantly by each generation, for it comes only once to a people. And just to see this judge just throwing down in this opinion, especially when our Supreme Court has just absolutely abandoned the American people, is really thrilling and encouraging. So I want to give a real shout out to Judge Young. Thank you for your opinion if you happen to be listening to this podcast. And thanks for standing up for the Constitution. Yeah, that's so
really
what gives
great.
You hope?
A similar thing, actually, our friend Jamie Raskin talks about this all the time in terms of the legal stuff that's happening and the losses that the Trump administration is having writ large, across courts and all of these different decisions. And, of course, we have the Supreme Court, which has been favorable to Trump, but not unilaterally, not totally. There's been a few decisions that they've pushed back on, but mostly not. It's his court. But we've seen these other other decisions coming down. And here in California, this is a very California-centric podcast, I guess, but UCLA, the Trump administration has restored almost all of the 500 NIH grants that it had suspended in July in response to a federal judge order that they must restore those grants. So not only did the judge rule that those grants must be restored, the administration has complied with that ruling. So, this is what we're seeing in so many of these cases that really gives me hope that, the Constitution is prevailing in a lot of cases. The rule of law is prevailing in a lot of cases. And, man, there has never been a regime, I'm not going to call them an administration, a regime that has pressure tested the Constitution like this one. And they've gotten away with a lot, but there's a lot they're not getting away with. And, we've got to stay vigilant and keep calling out every single thing that they do. It's a blitzkrieg of criminality. But, this gives me hope to see these decisions. And, I expect that we'll see more.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Okay, well, always a great conversation. Didn't even get to talk about the great concert that I went to over the weekend. I was going to lead with that, but I encourage everyone to go and see some music, see some live music. That's do that for your spirit. Tedeschi Trucks Band. Just going to say it's one of my favorite bands playing today. So having said that, I'm excited for everyone to hear this really great conversation with our friend. I say our friend now because he's now my bestie too, Robert Hubbell. Robert Hubbell is a former lawyer and current father and husband who gives inspiration and direction to thousands of folks every day on his Today's Edition newsletter and podcast. Robert, it's so great to finally meet you, and welcome to the Practivist Pod.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
The honor is definitely mine. I've been following you for a long time because, as is the case with Jess and myself, all three of us are essentially class of November 2016. Your newsletter started in response to Trump v1. For those who may not know you, can you share a little bit about your background and talk about why you started Today's Edition?
Sure. I am a retired lawyer. I practiced at big law firms, global law firms. I was in management on the executive committee at major law firms for 40 years. I had a securities litigation practice and other specialties as well. I was a trial lawyer, practiced before the SEC. I wasn't particularly politically active. You left out a very important part of my bio, which is that I'm a father, husband, and a grandfather.
And a grandfather. How could I leave that out? I'm sorry.
not the case when this all started. So we have thank you. We have 3 adult daughters. And as 2016 rolled around, we assured them in a very adult way that the adults in the room would assure that Trump was not elected in 2016. And when he was, it was devastating. To everyone in my family, but it was especially hard on my wife and daughters because Trump was a sexual predator. He was a misogynist. He was a bully. He's someone who thrives on creating fear and anxiety. And I, like millions of Americans, my wife and daughters had a very difficult time even hearing Trump's voice or seeing him on the television, which is still true today for millions of Americans. And one of our daughters in particular was very shaken by the election. And so she was in D.C. My wife and I went out to D.C. to help ground her, get her necessary help. And we did that. And then when we came back to Los Angeles from that trip to D.C., my wife and I were sitting on our living room sofa talking about, okay, this is going to be a long, painful process. What are we going to do to help our daughters, who at that point, understandably, were looking away from this train wreck?
Yeah.
And my wife suggested, look, why don't you just write an email to them every night, explaining to them what's going on and trying to provide them some sense of hope and ground them as we move forward. And so I did. In November of 2016, I began sending a nightly email to my family, my 3 daughters and my wife. And I continued to do that through February of 2017, at which point 3 family friends said, "Hey, we'd like to hear what you're saying to your daughters every day. Can we be part of the newsletter, the email chain?" So I started sending that. And on February 2nd, I just put in the subject line of the email, today's edition, and then whatever the subject was. And that's why the newsletter has the stupidest name possible, most nondescript. Nobody knows what it means, but it comes from this nightly email to my family. And so I just, each night I'd say today's edition about this, today's edition about that. And after 5 or 6 months, I think there were 200 people or so who were asking to receive that nightly email. And then Google tried to kill me because I was using the BCC field. And if you use the BCC field, Google tries to squash you like a bug because it thinks you are a spammer.
You moved it up to a YAM or something?
I moved it over to Constant Contact. And I got to about 20,000 people who were receiving the nightly email, still calling it today's edition. I was still practicing law. I was writing the newsletter when I was in trial, when I was in Asia, when I was in Europe. And sometimes it was a paragraph. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 sentences. But the dailiness of it sort of got into people's rhythm, and they started to depend on it. So it got to be about 20,000 people, for which I was paying Constant Contact a princely sum to publish a free newsletter. Many of my readers were following Heather Cox Richardson over on Substack. I moved to Substack because it was free for me to publish. It had a voluntary subscription model. And to my great surprise, 18,000 people followed me over to Substack. And about a week or 2 after I was there, I got a call from someone at Substack who said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but who are you?" And I said, "I'm a practicing lawyer. I write this daily thing." And they said, "Well," and I don't fault Substack at all. They said, "Well, great, we'll help promote you and cross-platform you and do this and monetize that." And I said, "No, thanks. I'm practicing law as a lawyer. I do this on the side." And I just continued to write. And over time, the newsletter, and then I'll stop talking. I warned you, Steve, that I talk a lot.
Podcast, but that's what it's for. Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the newsletter occupies this odd niche where it looks at the news. It tries to do so in an honest, intellectual, analytical way, but also tries to provide some grounding and hope, and most importantly, perspective about the day's news. And for whatever reason, that now resonates with hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. It's been a blessing in my life because it has given us friends all over the world. It has allowed me to promote progressive and grassroots causes in a way that I couldn't before. And so, now I'm talking to you, and I'm still doing what I did 8.5 years ago, which was writing a nightly email to my daughters, no differently than I had done 8.5 years ago.
It's incredible. It's such a beautiful way to start too. And I have to say, we really have a lot in common, a few key things in common for how we both started this work. Because I have a wife and one daughter. I just have the one daughter who was a young teenager when Trump was elected the first time. And we had the same struggles, the same conversations. In fact, after Trump was elected, our daughter Lucy came to us and said, "Are we ever going to be happy again?" That was what she said. And so I needed to do something for us, for ourselves, for our own anxiety and mental health, and also to contribute because, I felt like I had been sort of phoning it in. Literally, I'd done some phone banking and that was about it. I felt like I had to do more. But the other key thing that we have in common was I really followed my wife's lead. She inspired me to, have the courage of my convictions. And she went to an early Indivisible meeting that I just kind of tagged along to. And that's where I got my start. For me, it was Swing Left. I found Swing Left and started doing that, and then did the podcast a few years later. But what is so important, I think, for people listening to understand is when I first started doing this, the prevailing thing going through my head was fear, outrage, and also what could I possibly do? Like, I'm not a professional politician. I'm not involved in this. Like, how can I make an impact? And when you look at what you have done with this beautiful, simple act of writing a letter every day, an email to your daughters to help them navigate this and infusing it with perspective and hope, which is really important, then, obviously you weren't anticipating your audience to grow the way and be where it is now. But, it's just, it should be an example to everyone that we have agency, and maybe we're not going to be Robert Hubbell and write every day and have hundreds of thousands of listeners, but, we're going to have an impact, right?
Well, you've hit upon part of my key message to readers, and I probably write this once a week, which is understandably people are anxious, maybe even frightened. I got an email 30 minutes ago from a reader who said, "Is this as scary as it seems?" I haven't responded to her yet. And
that could be about any number of things too.
Yeah. And what I urge people, first of all, you and I have hit upon the same secret to success. We've become involved. We've become active. As soon as you do that, you no longer feel that you are a victim of events, but that you are helping to shape history. That's step number one.
Yeah.
Step number two is to realize that people around us are feeling anxious and frightened, and they are looking for social cues about how to act. What do I do given that Trump just had this meltdown in front of 800 generals from the U.S. military? How do I act? And what the most important thing we can do at a personal level is to not give up and to model courage or bravery in whatever way we can. It may be standing by yourself on a roadside. It may be showing up at a postcard. Whatever you can do to model courage and confidence will comfort and inspire other people. You may not know, you may never know how you touch other people's lives, but as long as you don't give up and other people don't get, we're going to win. We will prevail. The arc of American history is taking a slight detour, but 20 years from now, 50 years from now, America will be a great nation and will remember Donald Trump as a stain on our history and as little else. But what that requires is for us not to give up. And if you can be that person who models that behavior to others, you're a blessing. You're a mitzvah in other people's lives. On the other hand, if you are feeling anxious, if you're afraid to look at the news, I hear from close friends, I can't even read the newsletter anymore. It's too scary. My advice to them is to join in community. Glue yourself to someone who is standing by a roadside, who is going to a phone bank. Just be in their presence. Just sit there. And over time you'll say, well, you know what? I can write a postcard, which is, by the way, the gateway drug to activism, or I'll stand by the roadside with them, or I'll make a few phone calls, which, by the way, sounds scary, but it isn't at all.
Basically, what you're saying is you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to end up getting a haircut.
Okay, there you go. There you go. And so this concept of personal courage and of just not giving up is the thing that will save us. The answer to all of our problems is tens of millions of Americans saying enough. We saw it with Jimmy Kimmel. Mm-hmm. We saw it in 2018. We saw it in 2020. We'll see it in 2026 and in 2028. I'm confident of that.
I love that. I share your view. We are very much aligned. And I also think the most powerful thing that anyone can be is an example. Yes. Words are cheap. Actions speak volumes. And I talk about what you just said, the ripples on a pond. Like, we don't get to see the impact we have. Very often you talk about making phone calls. You talk about knocking on doors. We don't get to see what impact those conversations really have, but they ripple. They have huge effects. And I love what you said. We talk about the beloved community on this show all the time and what it does to our soul to be in community with each other, especially in these dark times when we're worried. And so, yeah, go hang out with folks and jump in. It's we make great change when we get a little bit out of our comfort zone also and start doing new things. But I want to circle back, though, since, we do have some stuff going on and get your perspective on it, which is basically what your reader had just asked you about. So you can tell us all, there was this crazy, 800 plus top military brass that Hegseth convened so that he could talk about push-ups and haircuts, and Trump could spew over an hour of his usual political grievance. Is this as bad as it looks? What kind of perspective can you give us on what we just saw with this military convening?
I take incredible confidence from what just happened, and let me explain why. Trump and Hegseth appeared before the 800 senior military officers in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force. And they showed up and they gave what they thought were going to be barn burner speeches that talked about throwing aside, the rules of war and international treaties and, blaming Joe Biden and castigating Democrats. And do you know what the generals did? They sat there in silence.
Yeah.
In silence. And that unnerved Trump. He even commented on it. He said, I don't have the words yet, but it was something like, boy, this is a tough crowd. Can I have a little bit of applause? And they didn't.
He said, basically, you can go ahead and applause. If you don't like something, you're welcome to get up and leave. But if you do, say goodbye to your rank and job, basically.
Right. So it's hard, it's hard to talk about the military. Everyone has their own experiences. Many readers may remember, what happened in the 60s in the Vietnam War, and it's complicated. But I feel that the professionalism and the loyalty of the senior officers and of the enlisted people is a saving grace for America. Those generals, in their silence, were honoring their oaths to the Constitution. They were there because their commander-in-chief was there, not because Donald Trump was there. And their silence was purposeful. It could have been otherwise. They could have given him a standing ovation. They could have chanted USA, USA. They could have applauded when Pete Hegseth talked about no longer following the Geneva Convention in effect, or throwing out the rules of war, or when he talked about attacking Democratic cities, that were shooting at firemen on top of ladders. They did not. Their stony silence was a manifestation of not only their loyalty, but their professionalism. And moreover, I haven't watched the entire speech, but I've seen probably 10 or 15 minutes in clips. I mean, it was frightening because Donald Trump is not a well man. He slurred his way through the speech. He either was heavily medicated or is suffering from small strokes, TIAs. I don't quite know what's going on there. Pete Hegseth is like a little teenage boy playing a video game. And those generals, they're serious people. They can spot a poser when they see one because they have a lot of officers like Pete Hegseth, and they counsel them out of the military. They all go on to run for Congress or serve as hosts on Fox News. But, if you think about it, the generals have tens of thousands of enlisted men and women under their care who have all the sorts of problems that men and women have: drug addictions, breakups, divorces, mental health issues, financial problems, cancer. And so you look at those senior officers, and they have risen through the ranks because they're trusted, because they can take care of the people under their charge. And then these two clowns show up and spew this ridiculous, as I said, video game version of the Army. I mean, my God, Donald Trump proposed that the Navy take this revolutionary step of creating something called battleships. He did.
Because of an old war movie that he loved.
he said that the current ships are made out of aluminum and they begin to melt when the missiles are 2 miles away. Can you imagine with those generals, many of whom have PhDs in science or engineering or nuclear physics, and they listen to this idiot say these ridiculous things. And so I think they all walked out of there thinking, oh my God, the military, the professionalism of the military is more important than ever. So I think we should all breathe a huge sigh of relief. I mean, I can't tell you, and then I'll be quiet. I can't tell you how many emails I got from readers, mostly men, telling me that Trump was going to declare martial law at this meeting.
Yep. Oh,
he didn't.
Okay.
He embarrassed himself. Now, he used militaristic language. He used obnoxious rhetoric, but it is the same language he used on the campaign trail. The only thing that is different is he said it now in front of 800 generals, all of whom silently rolled their eyes to the back of their head until it hurt. And he embarrassed himself. So I feel actually lifted up by the stony, professional, loyal silence of the generals. God bless them all.
Yes, seriously, that is great perspective and a great point. And if you look at the main picture that's going around the news right now of all of the generals and the brass there, they very much don't just look nonpartisan, but they look very somber. They're sort of whispering to each other. Like if you look at the body language of that picture, it is definitely not one of excitement and support. And to your point, what a disaster it would have been and how terrifying it would have been if they had cheered, if he had come in and they were applauding all of this insanity and what Hegseth was saying. So I'm going to take everything that you just said, because I love that perspective and I think it's dead on. The other thing that I do want to talk about, and this is Tuesday morning as we're having this conversation, and the show won't air until Thursday, so we will know a lot more about the impending government, Republican shutdown, by the time this airs. So this may or may not age well, but I do want to, say shared in your newsletter a really important aspect of this, of what Dems want before they sign on to any budget that isn't getting talked about as much. And that's that Trump can't unilaterally take away funding from what was appropriated by Congress. And, that really resonated with me, because one thing that I know the founders in all of this really didn't anticipate, like, there was other things that around the executive branch that were not exactly codified, but the founders were still talking about it. But the one thing that they didn't think that Congress would do is abdicate their power. They didn't think that anyone would willingly cede power that they had. And that's exactly what these Republicans in Congress have done by allowing Trump to just stop the funding that Congress had appropriated, and by Constitution, Trump is required to execute. So, you know, can you talk about that and why that's not the I mean, I kind of know why it's not the central focus, because healthcare is going to resonate with the general public more than, you know, democracy, sadly, but it's important. But anyway, what's your take on all of that?
I fully support not the Democrats not voting in favor of a continuing resolution or a 2026 budget until Republicans and Trump agree that they will abide by a continuing resolution or a budget. And, you know, one of the greatest scandals of Trump's second term is that from the very first day, he has withheld funds that have been appropriated by Congress. Yeah. And I know that sounds like big deal, you know, political fight, blah, blah, blah. But it is a very big deal. Article 1 of the Constitution says that Congress passes laws, and some of the laws that Congress passes are the laws that appropriate funds. And the president's job is to faithfully execute those laws. That is, to spend those funds. Not spending those funds violates Donald Trump's constitutional oath, and it undermines the separation of powers and the checks and balances that the founders the drafters of the Constitution carefully created. And, you know, I want people to think back to 2019 when we first impeached Donald Trump. What people have forgotten is at the basis of the impeachment was withholding funds that had been appropriated by Congress. In 2019, doing that was an impeachable offense. Now it's just every day the newspapers just say, oh, he withheld these funds and those funds. And nowhere do they say, and oh, by the way, that is illegal. Right. It's unconstitutional. It tears at the fabric of the Constitution. And we act like, you know, no big deal. It's, you know, the courts will work it out. No, it is a big deal because the courts aren't going to work it out. The Supreme Court has already essentially given Donald Trump a pass on this in 2 cases. So Trump now has the ability to withhold funds that our elected representatives have appropriated, and he's raising independent sources of revenue through tariffs. So now, instead of Congress collecting taxes and spending money, you have the president laying tariffs, and he claims the authority to spend those tariffs however he wants, and he claims the authority not to spend the money that Congress appropriates. That is a constitutional revolution of astounding breadth and depth, and the press could care less. You know, out of 99 comments or 100 comments that are made about this crisis, one commentator will note that, oh, by the way, this is illegal. And look, Jeffries and Schumer understand this, so they are doing something that is very smart. When the big ugly bill was passed, Democrats did not have the filibuster available because the filibuster does not apply to the reconciliation bill.
Right.
Just trust me on that. The filibuster does apply to the 12 funding bills that actually appropriate the funds to specific programs. So we're now in a point where the Democrats have the filibuster finally to use against the big ugly bill, but they can't use it against the entire bill, right? I mean, we can't, the bill is 4,000 pages long. So instead, they've picked out healthcare as something to draw a line in the sand. And that's as good an issue as any. And to use it as an avatar for saying, we are going to not cooperate with you until you both reform what happened on healthcare. But if you listen carefully, Schumer and Jeffries are also saying, and the president guarantees that he'll spend the money that we approve through a continuing resolution or a 2026 budget. So it's a very big deal. And at root is a constitutional crisis that we're going to have to get by. And I have ideas about how we get out of this, but I'll stop talking here and let you ask questions.
No, well, I would love to hear how we get out of it. But I thank you for articulating the severity of it. The mainstream media doesn't cover it. And this isn't also to say we shouldn't be talking about healthcare. There is no doubt that healthcare is going to be the defining issue coming into the midterms, just as it was back in 2018 when we flipped the House and we were fighting to save the ACA. So, so that's very important. But with everything else, we have to be able to pay attention to a lot of things at the same time in this landscape, which is by design. So, what are your ideas for the way out?
Well, let me put this in Josh Marshall's mouth of Talking Points memo, because I've worn out my pick on this. What Josh Marshall says is that the first thing we must do when we retake power is reform the Supreme Court, because if we do not do that, nothing else matters. The court has adopted a radical theory of the unitary executive, which is nowhere in the Constitution, and which they are using simply as a matter of expedience to impose their religious, nationalist, Christian agenda on all of America. Yeah. And let me just say, I'm not anti-Christian. I'm a unicorn. I'm a practicing Catholic. But what is being done in the name of Christianity is abhorrent. And there have been other authoritarian dictators in history in the last century who co-opted Christianity to do ugly things. And we are in the same place. So how do we reform the Supreme Court? It is much more simple than people think. The size of the Supreme Court is set by congressional statute. All it would take to pass a statute enlarging the Supreme Court is a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate and the signature of the president. So you can enlarge the Supreme Court to overwhelm the reactionary majority. Let's put a pin in that for a moment. A lot of people say, well, let's limit their terms. Let's rotate their terms. Let's, give each president the authority to appoint two. Let's do all sorts of those, types of good ideas. Mm-hmm. Each and every one of those would require a constitutional amendment, which would mean 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress, the signature of the president, and the ratification of 38 states. We will never get to that point. But what we can do is next time we take control of Congress and have a president is we have a majority in both houses and we expand the court so that we simply overwhelm the reactionary majority. And now I'm going to say something provocative. How big should the Supreme Court be? Ooh. Well, in 1789, we had 4 million people in America and we had 6 justices. We now have 100 times as many people. Order of magnitude. We have 3 more justices. So instead of 100 times larger, the court has only grown by 50%. Now, I'm not saying that the Supreme Court should be 100 times larger than the 6 that were there in 1789, but it certainly shouldn't be 9. It should be, for example, as large as the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which works wonderfully with 27 justices. So let's expand it to 27. What's the problem with that? And when I say that, what people always say is, well, if we do that, won't Republicans just expand it bigger? Let them. If we don't do the right thing because we're afraid of what Republicans might do, we will never do anything. And the fact of the matter is, if we expand the court to 27, they'll need to expand it to 65 or 70 in order to overcome the existing majority. And at that point, I think people might say, you know what, this doesn't work. We should reform the Supreme Court through a constitutional amendment, by rotating the justices, by putting an age limit, by imposing a mandatory code of ethics, by making it so that we mandatory disclosures, and in my simplistic view, Congress can withhold jurisdiction from the Supreme Court. It's right there in the Constitution. The Congress can limit the jurisdiction of the court. It should just say, if there is any justice who is suffering under a conflict of interest and that justice fails to recuse him or herself from this case, jurisdiction is denied to the court in that case. And so effectively, the court only has jurisdiction over those matters in which justices have appropriately recused themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, again, that might take a constitutional amendment. The first step is expand the court, overwhelm the reactionary majority, which has just collapsed in utter shame and disingenuousness and deceit. I'm a lawyer, and I can tell you what the Supreme Court has done is beyond imagination. No one thought that John Roberts and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh would do these sorts of things. And it's just shameful. It's just shocking. So the first step.
I have some friends who went to school with Kavanaugh, so they're not so surprised, but the rest of us, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the difficulties when I first started saying 8 years ago, expand the Supreme Court. Oh boy, did I get blowback from everywhere. And now I think almost everyone agrees that we should expand the Supreme Court, that it's really the only way out of this mess. And, I'm a Joe Biden fan. I really like Joe Biden. There are three things that I'm very sorry he did. One is to shake Mohammed bin Salman's hand in an effort to get oil going, and another was to not reform the Supreme Court when he had the chance. Instead, he sent it to a blue ribbon committee to die because he was an institutionalist who believed that if we reformed the court, we would undermine its legitimacy. How quaint, given where we are now.
And where are we now? How's that legitimacy looking right now? Yeah, well, I agree with you. I was excited about expanding it to 12, so 27. That's a that's a whole nother thing. I know we only have a few. We're a little over with you. I hope you have time to answer the last question that we ask all of our guests, and I think you'll like it because once again we're very aligned on what we do, the purpose of our show here. The last question we ask, and you've already answered it in many ways, but what is bringing you the most hope right now?
I haven't really spoken about that. One of the great things that I get to do because of the newsletter is I get invited to speak before groups all over the country. And in fact, not all over the world, but in other countries as well. I know we are going to win because on Sunday, I was in a backyard in the San Fernando Valley with 24 people who were writing postcards in support of Prop 50. Think back to 2015. That would have never happened. And what I saw in the backyard in the San Fernando Valley last Sunday is happening all up and down the coast in California, all across the nation. The grassroots movement is the thing that will save America. It is dismissed and minimized, and it's actually abused in some ways because the politicians and consultants who control the mailing lists don't want to give it to people who will go out and knock on doors for free because that cuts out their livelihood. So what I would say is we will get through this moment because of the American people. It will take a lot to provoke the 30 or 40 or 50 million of us who will stop this, but it will happen. I'm confident. We just saw a taste of it with Jimmy Kimmel.
Yep.
And when the grassroots movement saves democracy again, what will happen is that the politicians and the pundits will step up to take credit for it. And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
Because we're not in this for the credit. We're in this to pass on the flame of democracy to our children and grandchildren, just as it was given to us by people who were attacked and beaten, by people who were jailed, and they had no hope that they would see the day when their efforts bore fruit. That's why we're here today. And if all we do is just hold back the forces of darkness, that is a sacred duty. We are doing exactly what people before us did. But I think that we are 2 years or 4 years or 6 years away from turning this whole thing around. We can't be impatient. We can't quit. We have to be steadfast. It will take a while. Things may get worse before they get better, but boy, they are going to get better. Donald Trump is not going to derail this 240-year experiment in democracy of a nation that is vast, that has heft, that has momentum, that dwarfs anything that is going on in MAGA right now. So I want people to be confident and to serve as examples and leaders for others, just as you're doing. And if I can put in a plug for my friend Jessica Craven, I've canvassed with her in large apartment complexes where people were suspicious and opened their doors that much and didn't want to talk to someone because every time a white person shows up at their door, it's to collect a debt or to serve them with something. I saw Jessica chase down people in the parking lot who were trying to run away to avoid, this woman who's running after a race. And by the time she left, they were hugging her, saying thank you. She's a true warrior. So God bless you, Jessica.
I love that. I've seen her in action too. It is both frightening and inspiring at the same time. But it's just so great to be in conversation with you. Robert Hubbell, thanks so much for being here today.
Steve, thank you. And thank you, Jessica, for having me. It's an honor. God bless you for your work.
So much for joining us. Don't forget that all the links to our actions are in our show notes, so don't just listen, click those links and take action. Please do subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple, YouTube, wherever you're finding us, and share our show with your friends, family, neighbors, community, everyone. Help us build this Practivist pod community. If you are able to support our show on Substack, we'd be very grateful for that, and you'll get the ad-free version of our show there. We will be back next week with some more Practivist Pod. So until then, don't forget, hope is an action.